This is Leah Terechansky with the Real News in Barcelona, Spain, where this week the Russell Tribunal in Palestine took place. The purpose was to examine the complicity of the European Union in what the tribunal referred to as Israel's policy of war, occupation and colonization for 60 years. Although the ruling of the judges here is non-binding, its participants included EU parliamentarians, ambassadors and Supreme Court judges from all over Europe, Africa, the United States, Israel and Palestine.
I am Pierre Galland, and I am a member of the organizing committee of the Tribunal Russell on Palestine. The original purpose is that we believe today that what is doing by Israel in Palestine, everybody know that. Everybody know what happened after the Gaza war with the blockade. And also the UN have taken all the resolutions that you can believe need or they exist.
I'm Leila Shahid. I'm the Palestinian ambassador to the EU, working in Brussels, representing the Palestinians at the European Union. It was very important for the Palestinians that this initiative was taken, because we can see that not much is done by states in terms of implementing international law or international humanitarian law. I think that the initiative of convening this tribunal and to make the first chapter on the very specific subject of third-party responsibilities and obligations, and this, in this case, EU, European Union obligation, is very important. First and foremost because the EU is the first partner of Israel in trade and economic relations. Even if the States is the first supporter of Israel, the real economic partner is the EU.
The relationship between the European Union, Israel and the Palestinian Authority was outlined in two bilateral agreements, one between the EU and Israel and the other an interim agreement between the EU and the Palestinian Authority. Europe is Israel's largest market for exports and its second largest source of imports, after the US, thanks to the agreement. One of the top industry trades is arms and military technology, with France being the #1 European exporter of weapons to Israel. 2 weeks ago, the bilateral agreement made international news when the European High Court ruled that products from Jewish settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories can no longer be labeled as made in Israel and will not be eligible for the cuts in trade tariffs. It is on the basis of the EU-Israel Association Agreement that the Russell Tribunal examined European complicity. Members of the jury were mostly long-term activists and politicians, but also included Spanish Supreme Court Judge José Antonio Martín Palín and renowned British human rights barrister Michael Mansfield.
We have found that the European Union has dismally failed to implement its own provisions. For example, there was a resolution passed by the European Parliament to suspend an agreement, trade agreement, between Europe and Israel, in a sense as a sanction, because the trade agreement has a clause which is obligatory, that if you're a partner in trade, you as a trading partner have to respect the laws of human rights and humanitarian precepts. Well, Israel plainly hasn't. I think there are many people who feel that we've had enough of waiting for the law to be complied with. So the question now is, what are we going to do?
Now, one of the biggest criticisms of the European Union from Palestine is that it fills in the holes that are created by the Israeli occupation by funding aid that basically makes the breaches of the occupation function.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, it's true that according to the Fourth Geneva Convention, any occupying power has the responsibility of ensuring the social, the economic, the daily services that a civilian population needs.
The tribunal focused on 6 questions about which the jury passed judgment. To do so, it held 2 days of hearings from mostly European experts and legal advisors. The questions it set out to answer are: 1. Have the European Union and its member states breached their obligation to promote and ensure respect for the Palestinian people's right of self-determination? 2. Has the EU breached its obligation to ensure respect for international humanitarian law vis-à-vis the Palestinian people in the case of the blockade of the Gaza Strip and the CAS-led military operation? 3. The sovereignty of the Palestinian people to their national resources in the context of Israel's settlements. 4. The annexation of East Jerusalem. 5. Construction of the wall by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territories. And 6. In the light of the foregoing, have the European Union and its member states breached their obligation to ensure respect for international law and European law in the context of the agreements signed between the EU and the State of Israel?
During Vietnam's war, during Nicaragua's actions, during Iraq's invasion, they have been also this kind of tribunal. We are completely conscious that they are not effectivity in the point of view of juridical consequences, but in all the cases it's very important for the public opinion to have this kind. And it's especially good to have this kind of reflection 1 year after the conflict.
Do you think public opinion can change what's going on in Israel-Palestine?
No, not change. Perhaps in Spain I think that cannot change, but to have conscience about the results of this action, of this war action.
Walk us a little bit through what is the international law? What is exactly the European in violation of?
Well, first of all, it's in a violation of its own constitution, and particularly in the International Court of Justice, which is made up of judges from all over the world, sits in The Hague, and it proclaims and declares what the position is. And when it considered the construction of the wall in Israel, what this multifaceted international tribunal court said in 2004 was that not only was Israel in breach of its own obligations, because it was practicing, it didn't use the word apartheid, but it was practicing a form of apartheid in Israel. It was saying third countries, that's how they're called, other countries also have an obligation.
The jury issued a set of conclusions that are not legally binding and are based on the hearings it held. It found that Israel violated international law it itself signed up to in all the questions it set out to answer. It also stated other Israeli practices, such as targeted killings, are violations and concluded that the EU is complicit. The jury, which was legally advised by, among others, prominent British lawyer David Macover, based its conclusions also on the European Constitution and international law.
While the EU and its member states are not the direct perpetrators of these acts, they nevertheless violate international law and the internal legal order of the EU as set down by the EU treaty, either by failing to take the measures that Israel's conduct requires them to take, or by contributing directly or indirectly to such conduct.
The Russell Tribunal on Palestine calls on the European Union and on each of its member states to impose the necessary sanctions on its partner Israel through diplomatic, trade and cultural measures in order to end the impunity that Israel has enjoyed for decades.
The Barcelona session is only the first of 3 more to come. The next one will be held in London towards the end of 2010. Its purpose will be to deliberate the complicity of corporations in assisting Israeli violations of international law.
So now that the tribunal is over and the judgment has been made, do you feel that you've achieved it?
It's only one step. It's the first step of the tribunal, because the tribunal is a process. It will take 2-3 years. And during the 2-3 years, we hope that the mobilization of the citizen, as citizen, not as militant, as citizen, claiming for international rights in this situation, it can be something very important.